Hi, my name is Jason Ford, and I'm currently the professor of game design and simulation at Kingwood College in Texas. And this is the audio portion of the presentation that I did inside of Florida, although probably not as great. Hopefully, if you'll enjoy it regardless and so forth. But a lot of conferences that you'll attend. And I've been to quite a few of them myself. A lot of times they'll speak of a lot of these all-new technologies and practices that will basically aid you, the teacher, inside of the classroom as a solution, but never really get into what the actual problem is. And I think that it's important, and I think this is why I decided to really speak on this, is that I think it's important that you really understand, as an educator, who your audience is for. When we think about the technologies that we're seeing at these conferences as aids for us, I think it's sort of misleading. We really should be looking for things that aid, the learning of our students. And the reason I chose to do this is because I worked in advertising for several years, and we did things like focus groups. And one of the things I used to teach the visual communication courses in graphic design, and the things that we would talk about in there is that, before you really design anything, you have to understand the audience that you're delivering this message to. You could deliver the exact same message to a 20-year-old and a 40-year-old, but it has to come across differently. You cannot advertise to the two age groups the same way. 20-year-olds have a different color palette. They respond to different fonts, to certain fonts different than than those 40 plus. And so understanding that really makes you really made our business in advertising much better, being able to basically take that message, and use the right images, the right colors, the right fonts that spoke to that age group, in order to effectively deliver the message. And I think that's what I'm really trying to do in this presentation, is to really help give you an understanding of basically who the millennial student is. Now, I'm not going to lie that when you really look at this, the things I'll be showing you, this was brought up in the conference, and there's there's some interesting truth to it, is that, this may not fit the student that is inside of your classroom. This is a broad base. I think regardless of what you do a search for millennial student, the same information I'm presenting to you is the same information you're going to find. It does not seem to match those in the rural areas, as well as side of inner city. However, there's a lot of potential things in this presentation that can still work for that particular group, though. So anyway, when we think about engaging the millennial student, I know a lot of us see the term engaging, and we think of engaging as grabbing attention, keeping their interest, or keeping them involved. But in reality, even though that's what we're thinking, once we get inside the classroom, it really feels something more like this. Us versus them, as though it's kind of like this constant battle. But take a look at these photos. This is Batman and Robin. And shouldn't they both be on the same team working together? Well, believe it or not, and I had to do some research to really pull this out, but Robin, who is Dick Grayson, in his adolescence, him and Batman were basically inseparable. But as he grows older, he begins to spend more time as the leader of the Teen Titans, and he takes on the identity of Nightwing to assert his independence from Batman. Now, I've seen a couple of the episodes of the old cartoons of Nightwing, used to watch with my son, and there was a few episodes that kind of showed, Robin and Batman didn't quite get along, so I had to really research this out, and just bear with me, but in Batman the Animated Series, there is an episode called Old Wounds, and it explains that Grayson, as Robin, fought with Batman over the latter's controlling nature and what the former saw as an unnecessarily harsh approach, causing Robin to leave Gotham as a result. However, he does return later as Nightwing, and he works together with Batman on occasion, but he never really fully reconciles with his former mentor. Kind of sounds a little bit like the youth of today. So, if teachers and students should basically be on the same side, what's really causing this separation? Well, in their book, Got Game, How the Generation is Reshaping Business Forever, and by the way, these references are available on the instructions PDF I've put on the CD for you. So, but in their book, Got Game, How the Generation is Reshaping Business Forever, John C. Beck and Mitchell Wade talk about how it's technology in video games that have produced a real generational gap. They're quoted as saying that it's not just that boomers and gamers grew up differently, it's those differences that have led to very different worldviews, which we'll see in just a moment. Claire Rains, in her article titled Managing Millennials, she points out that this is the first generation to grow up surrounded by digital media, which is basically leading to a digital divide. between boomers and these millennials. And more than anything, she says, it's this technology that has been the unifying factor for this particular generation, even globally. And one of my favorite authors, Mark Prinsky, which, if you ever thought about using the educational value of video games, he's an excellent author, along with James Paul G. But anyway, inside of his book, Don't Bother Me, Mom, I'm Learning, he brings up a lot of statistics about, how much influence, technology has on these particular students. And so here's some things from his book. He states that today's college grads will spend fewer than 5,000 hours of their lives reading, but they will spend more than 10,000 hours playing video games, another 10,000 on their cell phones, and 20,000 hours watching TV. This generation will have downloaded 2 billion ringtones a year, 2 billion songs per month, and have exchanged 6 billion text messages every day. And let's not forget the 250,000 emails and instant messages that they would have sent, as well as the 500,000 plus commercials seen all before the age of 21. That's a lot of digital media. And so when we take a look at this, basically Mark Prinsky in his book, and I think you'll see it other places, he refers to this particular groups as, digital natives. And so if they're the digital native generation, what does that basically make the rest of us? Well, in his book, as well as pretty much if you're out there looking at other different types of research, they'll call us the digital immigrants, people who have migrated into technology but still like to retain a foot in the past. And so Mark Prinsky has a few tips, hopefully to sort of let you know if you are a true digital immigrant. And so we're going to take a look at a few of these. He says you're probably a digital immigrant like me if you print out your emails or have your secretary print them out for you. I have a lot of tales about my former boss who used to do that. If you turn to the internet for information second instead of turning to it first, you're a digital immigrant. If you read a manual for a program on software or anything else, rather than assuming that the program will teach you. If you need to print out a document written on the computer in order to edit it. Or if you ever make one of those, did you get my email phone calls? This is I think they make fun of me and my coworker the most at the office, basically because I will send her an email, then immediately go to her office and ask, hey, did you get it? Instead of just, going down there to talk to her about it in the first place. But anyway, let's move on. And if you're also a digital immigrant, if you think that real life happens offline, really take a look at, Second Life online. Really kind of interesting. But anyway, so moving on. So basically, it's this digital gap that has really led to a lot of problems with education today. Keep in mind that as digital immigrants, we come from a pre-digital age, and we're trying to teach a generation that speaks almost an entirely different language. Where Mark Prinsky in his book says, basically we are assuming that kids are the same as they've always been, and that the same methods that worked in education when we were students will work for the students that we have now. And I really like this quote that he put in there. It says, today's students are no longer the students our educational system was designed to teach. The video I'm about to show you is also available on the CD in its native format, so you can use it. Keep in mind it's by Panasonic. That was given to me by my dean. I could not find the actual source for it, but take a look at this video, and I think it says a lot about education today, about how we teach and what our students are. Anyway, just a really good video, and I thought what was kind of interesting is that recently our campus newspaper brought up this exact same point. He said that what he felt like the environment that he was in and what he was learning today doesn't fit into the workforce for tomorrow. He says, I don't really feel like I'm being prepared to go out into the industry, and I think that's the deal. And Mark Prinsky, inside of his book, really talks about how the students in our classroom have grown up on the Twitch speed of video games and MTV. think about all the things that they're used to. The instant messaging. In fact, I was told that, and I think it's either when I saw Mark talking about, he says that basically anybody who emails is considered old school. That the new thing is instant messaging. That's how kids really communicate, not through email anymore, but basically instant messaging. They like things right then. They download the music. Forget buying the CD. In fact, this is probably embarrassing. Forget even going to the movie theater to watch the movie when they can find the bootleg version of it now. I kid you not. When Spider-Man 3 just came out, wouldn't you know it was already on the student drive while it was at the theater. So anyway, I don't. So anyway, let me get back on track. So anyway, so they like things now. Forget waiting. They've got camera phones inside of their pockets. A lot of libraries, you can find everything that you need inside of a library on your laptop. They've got beam messages back and forth. Instant gratification. They can get instant feedback. In fact, instant feedback is what draws a lot of people into the gaming world, the immersion. And when something goes wrong, when something goes right, they're told right away. There's not a lag time at all. And so, anyway, and one of the things to keep in mind is that this particular group, and one of the things I came across is that it's 90 million strong. And when you work in advertising, or when you deal with that particular age group, it's whatever age group has the money. Basically they're calling the shots. And it used to be the boomers. I'm a Generation X, and we got kind of left out. But the millennials at 90 million strong will be calling the shots probably from here out until the next generation steps up. But anyway. So I think the question is that we've come to ask ourselves is basically, well then who really are the millennials? And more importantly, should we be afraid of them? Well, luckily the answer is no. In their book, Got Game, Beck and Wade, from all the research that was conducted, feel that the data shows that the members of this particular generation, they have extraordinary potential to become great professionals, great team members, and great CEOs. Despite the fact that they say that the same generation is also more than likely to tell you and I to chill out, get a life, and to walk a mile in a younger generation's shoes. So anyway, this particular generation, when you look at trends and so forth, when we talk about the millennials, I've seen different. Some people will still categorize them as the years that we're still living in, or right now. But a lot of the books I looked at, articles said that this generation was basically born anywhere from 1980 or 2000. And like I said, some have gone up to 2010 and 2020, lumping that particular age group into a huge, about 40 years, I think. But anyway, Claire Rains, inside of her book, has basically talked about this particular generation. She sees them as sociable, optimistic, talented, well-educated, collaborative, open-minded, influential, and achievement-oriented. I know you and I would probably look like, these are the students in my classroom. But anyway, yes, keep in mind, this is a generation as a whole. This is what's being shown about them. And it's not just one article. A lot of the things I've come across basically state the same thing. And so anyway, we look at the key trends that help shape this particular generation from the 90s and the 2000s, and the information I'm sharing with you right now, this is coming from Claire Rains' article, Managing Millennials. And again, the link is it's on the reference portion of the instructions PDF that I put on this CD. But anyway, the key trends that help shape this particular generation is, number one, the focus on children and family. During the post-World War II era, children were basically all the rage. Generation X, which is my generation, everything sort of shifted. We were the latchkey kids. More than likely, our parents would end up divorced. In fact, although really depressing, it's not in this one, but in one of my other books, it was saying our generation just really had a high rate of suicide. So that's depressing. But anyway, so I think a lot of that shifted back to the kids in the 90s. In fact, I remember hearing about Las Vegas, trying to become more family friendly. Eating out, where it once used to be the adult thing, is now considered a family thing. In fact, inside of her article, she makes notice that 90% of fathers actually attended the birth of their children. And this is, again, the information I'm sharing with you is coming from the article, but she says that the Federal Forum on Family Statistics reported that national attention to children was at an all-time high. Older parents, the average age for mom was actually now 27, brought more maturity to their roles as caregivers, teachers, and coaches. Then they also have scheduled and structured lives. Apparently, the millennials were the busiest of all generations, with teachers and parents basically having a very a structured schedule for them, whether it's after-school activities, things that are happening inside the classroom. Parents sort of taking control of that. Multiculturalism. This is the generation has the highest interaction with other ethnicities and cultures than ever before. In fact, inside the article, it mentions that UCLA's higher education research showed that this generation basically is at an all-time high among college freshmen with interracial interaction. Another key thing that sort of shaped them was terrorism. When we think about the early 90s, you think about the Oklahoma City, the bombing. You think about Columbine. And the one thing that really, I think that this generation can say that was really had an effect on them was September 11th in 2001. Pulling this group together. And out of that comes the heroism. What really brought heroes back in the spotlight was, think about the policemen, the firefighters that all ran into those situations to help the people out and ended up giving their lives for it. And so they saw a lot of this. The mayor, when Mayor Giuliani stepped up, to the plate. Even the President Bush, when he stepped up, this is a thing that helped shape them, the idea of a hero. In fact, what's interesting is that a lot of the things I came across really talked about the need, wanting to be able to look up to someone, looking for that mentor. And out of that heroism came a patriotism. After September 11th, stores couldn't keep the American flag in stock. Students were out there buying things that have flags on their shirts and everything else. I think today, I'm so sorry about that. I think today some would argue that's not the case with the Iraq War, but I still think there's a strong sense of patriotism with this particular group. Parent advocacy. More than anything, parents stepped up, into saying, hey, we want to be a part of the millennials' lives, of our children's lives. In fact, what's interesting is that when you read her article on this, this generation, millennials actually like their parents. And I think part of that was, as a Generation X, when, parents weren't so much involved in our own life, we decided, what, I want to be there for my child. And I think they made that change. Globalism. Think about the internet and everything else. We've got not so much pen pals, but now people play games, from all over the world, together in one spot. In fact, one of the books I came across, it was an interesting quote, said, by this particular game, it says, we don't really care what race you are, what ethnic background you are. All we really care about is the type of game that you play. And so that was kind of, but that's just the attitude of this particular generation. Everything's very global. Think about Amazon. Amazon, no matter where you're inside the world, it's open 24/7. They have access to everything, all over the globe. But anyway, so there are some key trends that help shape that information. Again, you can find that those references and those articles, those links and everything else on the instructions PDF. Now, characteristics of their particular work ethic. And I thought this was kind of interesting. And again, this is still coming from the Managing Millennials by Claire Rains. This particular group is seen as confident. A lot of us would like to think of them as being overconfident. But in her article, she makes this, and this is a really interesting point, that they've basically been raised by parents believing in the importance of self-esteem. And so, basically they feel like they can really overcome a lot of challenges. Some feel like, hey, I can leap the tall building like Superman and everything else. I can do it. And so forth, because their parents have taught them that. This generation is very hopeful. They're described, according to her article, Claire Rains' article, as being very optimistic, yet practical. They believe in the future and their role in it. They've read about businesses with basketball courts, stock rooms stocked with beer for employers, and companies that pay your way through school. They expect something very similar in the workplace they'll be going to. They want it to be challenging, collaborative, creative, fun, and financially rewarding. It'd be really interesting to do a search. I think if you looked up Google's workspace, you'd be really interesting to see what kind of things they offer their employees. Kind of interesting. And Pixar would be another really good one too. Another one is that they're very goal and achievement oriented. This particular generation, according to the things that I've read, and according to this article, basically this particular generation, it's not unlike many of them to show up at the work for the first day with their goals written out as to what they will be accomplishing, personal goals and everything else. This generation is also very civic minded. They have a very high rate of volunteerism. and they expect companies to basically be involved with their local communities. They're very inclusive. They like to be organized in teams. They want to make sure that basically anyone on the team, that there's no one left behind. They work together as a unit. And what was interesting, and I don't know if it's on this one or not. I think it comes a little bit later, so I'll just share. I'll just wait for it from that one. But anyway, so basically, a lot of the time they really expect teamwork to be a norm wherever they go, and diversity. They expect it to be diverse. They also are not afraid of risk. If you take a look at the generation, the .com era, basically the millennials have been grouped into that side. A lot of them could care less, didn't care too much if their business failed. And it's really interesting when you really start to read a lot of these books about the video game industry and those that came out of it. A lot of them, because they grew up on video games, played the marketplace like it was a video game. Okay? They failed, they lost the game, they lost the business, but you know what? They can always respawn or come back and try something new. So they're not afraid to take risk. And they also like to share. Whether it's music, whether it's movies, and as you and I know, even if it's tests. They have no problem with that, and they feel that all this information should be open. You did the work, it should come to me. In fact, when you look at the hackers' code of ethic, for a lot of programmers and stuff like that, it's really interesting. To basically, it's kind of, think open source. That's this generation right there. So anyway, that's our particular work ethic. Now, this coming inside of her article, this really deals with, I think, the work environment. But I kind of moved it into the thing about school environment, because I think that really, works a little bit best for what we're looking at. And so, let me jump to my particular notes on that. And so, for this particular generation, things they expect inside of a work or school environment is, number one, you be the leader. Okay, keep in mind that this generation has been highly structured. They've grown up where parents and teachers were basically planning out their lives and so forth. But they expect you to be the parent, not the parent. I think it's actually what some of them need. I'm sorry. They expect you to be the leader, and when they want you to be the leader, things that they're looking for in leaders are honesty and integrity. I think if you bring up anyone that's had that clouded, basically anyone that's been talked about inside the headlines, it's had that clouded past or anything else, you'd be surprised at how the millennials think about that. It's not, they want someone that, to step up, to be honest and true. They also have a challenge me attitude. They want learning opportunities. They don't want just the normal stuff. They want to try new things. Remember, they're not afraid to take risk. Give them a chance. Let them show what they can do. A lot of them would like to work with their friends. This is what was really interesting, is that a lot of workplaces, because this generation is so tight with their friends, some employers, I won't say a lot of them, but some employers actually, when they interview the one person, they actually think about bringing their friends in as well and hiring them all together. Wouldn't that be interesting? Seeing some of the friends of my students, I don't know how that company would function, I think, sometimes. They also have an attitude of, for an environment, let's have some fun. And I think this, particularly when I taught graphic design, I know that there were some schools that made students dress up in a tie, in slacks and everything else, show up to class on time, and I had students tell me that was horrendous. In my classroom, I'll show up in blue jeans. I didn't wear t-shirts all the time, because that's what the environment was like at what I worked at. It was hectic, but we had fun. We had music playing in the background. We got our work done. It was very collaborative. We worked with one another. We asked ideas of each other. And so a lot of times when I taught my class, that's how I did it, with that attitude of, hey, let's have some fun, but at the same time, we got deadlines. We have to know you guys need to know how to match it. And so, but they're looking for that sort of fun aspect, and an environment that is a little bit of fun can really help attract more students to it. So they also have the attitude of respect me. They want you to basically take their ideas and treat them respectfully, even though they haven't been around or may have as much knowledge as you do. But they want to be respected. They want to be heard, and be flexible. This has been my biggest challenge, because I'm so used to a deadline-oriented field that when students come in, that apparently my class was not the only thing that they were doing. I had students working 2 jobs, at the same time doing a ton of other things, and they wanted me to be flexible, with my deadlines. Those I worked out with some. Others I had simply told them no. Part of it was I had to teach them a little bit of responsibility as well. Sorry about that, my screensaver keeps popping on. But they expect us as well as their employers to be flexible with all that's going on inside of their life in addition to work. Yeah, we'll just move on from there. So, moving on from there. Let me jump back to my notes here. So, what does this basically mean for education? Okay, whereas Leslie Wilson puts it in her article on teaching millennial students, she puts it, professorship has changed. We are no longer an expert. We are now simply a person with expertise. And I thought that was a really interesting quote. In my graduate class for instructional technology, we kind of talked about this. Students are coming in with all this knowledge. In fact, in regards to technology, they're probably so much far more advanced than we are that we can't really say, well, I know more than you about this. No. In fact, I've had students come in who knew more about a particular software than what I was doing, especially when I took over the gaming. Good Lord, I never heard of half the games they were playing. But I didn't pitch myself as an expert. What I did is I told them, I said, listen, you guys will know more than me about a particular subject, but my job is to show you how what you know fits into the greater scheme of things. The one thing I do have over you is I have experience to show you how this fits out there in the real world. And so anyway, it seems like we've kind of moved to a facilitating basically type of role, which I particularly think is good. Instead of having students learning about something, we can help them learn to be something, as John Seeley Brown had put it. And I thought that was a really good quote by him. So anyway, taking a look at these, the learning preferences for millennials. And I think this also came from Claire Rains Managing Millennials as well. So anyway, what do they like? Well, first off, teamwork. And I think if you really think about this for your particular classroom, this will give you the chance. Remember, understanding your audience. I think forget about looking for new technologies to help you, to aid you as a teacher, but look for as technology as a way to aid the learning. What are projects you can put together to aid the learning? And these learning preferences will really help. Number one is teamwork. One of the things you can do is, if you can, is manage the space inside of your classroom, to where it's a little bit more group-oriented. Our gaming lab is set up where basically, there are 4 students to a particular desk, and so throughout the entire semester, I have them do, just small projects together as a team, and say, listen, in fact, I even give them points that if everyone at their table is there on class, on time, their particular group gets extra points. It's kind of like the kind of competitive thing. At the end of the semester, they all got each person in that team got a $25 Best Buy card, which is why we keep our spaces very small. So anyway, the other thing is group projects. Let them work together. And I know that the biggest thing is about the biggest problem with that is you're always going to have a student in there that's a slacker, who's not pulling his weight and everything else. But let me tell you something. That group, they'll let you know. I had students that tell me, can we fire this particular student? And I've known of teachers who said, yes, you can. And they would fire the student. That student would end up on his own team having to do the entire project by himself if he did not participate. But again, this is what they're used to. This is what they expect. Group projects, group work, teamwork. And in fact, this will also help them get ready for the workplace. Learning to deal with other personalities. That's always a favorite one. So another one is structure. A lot of them would like to be flexible. In other words, leave it kind of open, but at the same time, they need boundaries. I think about a lot of the... because I'm a gaming instructor, some of the games I've played where it's like this really great map. You can walk all over the place, but even though you can explore, there are still physical boundaries that say you cannot go beyond this point. And I think that that's what they expect. Because keep in mind, they've grown up with structure, with parents, with teachers telling them this is what you need to do. After you get out of class, you've got to go to this, you've got to go to work and everything else. So they like the freedom to explore, but at the same time, they need to have the boundaries. I was told by a student, one time I kind of left an open project. I said, listen, it's really open. He hated it. At the end of it, he came back to me and said, I liked the idea, but I needed boundaries. I needed something to help keep me focused on the inside of it. And so anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. The other thing that they like is Exponential Activities. And these are some of the ones that are recommended inside of our article. Number one, reverse mentoring. This also could be a combination of Leslie Wilson's teaching millennial students as well, but they talk about reverse mentoring, where, for example, we talked about you may not know everything technology to be used inside of your classroom. Maybe you don't know how to use PowerPoint effectively, but these students do. And so what you do is you let them come in and mentor you in that particular technology part, while you teach them, the subject matter and everything else. What would be really good is to get them to say, hey, listen, I want to put together a presentation that talks about this particular subject. Give them the material and have them do a PowerPoint. Studies have shown that I think when students teach it, which is almost similar to putting together PowerPoint, depending on how detailed it is, they will retain up to about 80, I think, to 90% of that material. Give them alternative assignments. Writing assignments, can be good, but what about something different? I remember one of the things I put off my graduate studies because I hated writing. I'm really bad at it. I can't tell you how bad I am at it. I'm just really bad at it. I make words up, all that type of stuff. I could send it to Turnitin, and Turnitin would send it back saying, good luck. You haven't copied anybody. At the same time, we don't have a clue what half of your stuff is saying. So anyway, so alternative assignments. I was given, when I was going through the certification process to teach high school before I taught in the college, we had an assignment. We had to teach a chapter. And everyone else was doing PowerPoint. And I was just like, you know what, I can't do PowerPoint. I was like, first of all, I didn't know it. And part of it's a creative side of me. I was like, I've got to do something more, do something different. In fact, I should have put this on your CD. Who knows, maybe I will. Anyway, so I came up with this miniature movie. Basically, it was called The Cycle of Reflection. And so I put together a movie. I was a youth leader at the time. I brought in the youth. I said, listen, guys, I need you to come up on a Sunday. So we shot a movie on a Sunday afternoon. I edited it Monday and Tuesday, presented it Wednesday. Boy, it was insane. What I found out is that your voice does not sound the same at 2 p.m. As it does at 2 a.m. So anyway, so I put together this basically a 12-minute black and white 50 style movie using animation and text to talk about the cycle of a reflection. It was fantastic. I loved the experience. It was 10 times more work than if I'd actually wrote it out or did the PowerPoint, but I liked it. I wanted to try something new, and so I took the risk and challenge. And I think that's what they're looking for, something different. Why not, instead of having them do a research paper, make them do a small movie? They've got camera phones and everything else. Say, listen, I want you to do if it's history, because I love history. Listen, I want you to put together, just a little movie, about 5 minutes or so forth, about this particular individual, this event whenever it happened. Well, they've got to research it out to really know what took place. They have to understand the character, that historical figure they're portraying, so they got to look that up. And I think it just provides a lot of opportunity. If you think about what is it? Out of the box lessons. Again, think about videos. If you want to see some really good ideas for out of the box lessons, look at MIT. They do some incredible stuff. And I think the speaker had talked about this. Was it Chris Dede? I think he mentioned how they're using GPS phones and things like that, using cell phones to help students do some learning and just anything that helps them get them out of the box. One of the things that we're doing in my gaming class for storytelling is I'm actually having them meet me at the park. They have to design a story based upon their exploration of the park. And I know it doesn't sound like a whole lot, but trust me, when you get these kids in a different environment or have them thinking about the lesson differently, it can really open up a lot of doors. And what I like about it is that each of these lessons can be totally different. Just get some really great experiences from semester to semester. One out of the box lesson I thought about doing, as if I were a history teacher, although I can't. My students told me right up front that I would probably be fired for doing it, although they would remember it. Well, I was thinking about, Saving Private Ryan. If you guys saw that film, it's just incredible. Whenever they get off the boat at the beginning, the bullets just sprayed right into the boat. I was just like, my God, how would that feel? Well, I thought about what I could is to have all the students line up outside of the door to get into the classroom and tell them, listen, whenever this door opens, you have to get to your seat as fast as you can, and not tell them why. So as they start coming through the door, I've got a paintball gun and just start shooting them, But anyway, so like I said, they thought I would probably get fired, and I probably would. But at the same time, they said they would never forget the lessons. But so anyway, think outside the box. Another experience you can do is service learning. And again, some of these sites I will provide an extra page of because I can't pull it up inside this small little window that I'm doing right now, but I'll put these links on there. But for service learning, this is a great opportunity. Remember, this generation really likes to get involved with community service. They have a high rate of volunteerism, and on two projects that I know of that we do at our college is one of them is by Dean Wolf. It's called, I think it was called Bordersville Project, where basically he takes a group of students. They went down to Bordersville, Texas, and what they did is they basically help. I don't want to say just say clean, well, that's basically what they helped clean up the old cemetery that was there. Before they went out, Dean would talk to the students about Bordersville, and I think, they were talking about, race issues and everything else. And so whenever they got to the cemetery, they're cleaning it out. One of the students was taught, noticed that off to the side there was a separate cemetery, just as badly overgrown. So when they began to go over there and looked at, that's where the slaves were buried. And it was really kind of interesting. He said the students had a really positive reaction to it. They did community service and got a lot out historical aspect out of it as well. The other one that we did with our graphic design students is that we had a design-a-thon, a 12-hour design-a-thon, where what we did is we would take projects from local area nonprofits. I think total we've done about 100 over the past 4 years, and we just had our fourth one. And we would take those projects, whether it's for posters, brochures, logos, all that type of stuff, and students would donate their time and their talent in those 12 hours to complete that particular project. We didn't charge them anything because it was our service to the community. And what was really interesting is that students will show up at 8 o'clock in the morning for that, but I can't even get it to show up to a 10 o'clock class on time. But anyway, the students loved it, and a lot of the work is being used by the local area nonprofits and everything else. And the nonprofits, just the testimonials, that just the thank yous was just so incredible. So anyway, service learning, things that you can tie in whatever your class is doing. How can we tie that or take that information they're learning in class and use it to benefit the local community? It also gives them a chance to really see, take that information they have and how it fits into the real world. So anyway, just something to think about. And I'll provide you the link to the design-a-thon. I don't think Dean has one to Bordersville, but I'll take a look for it. And of course, the other one is technology. This generation says you have to include technology at least some point in your delivery. And don't just think that's PowerPoint. In fact, what you think of as a really good PowerPoint, many millennials would. Well, here, let me be nice. Think about what they're exposed to. Go to the movies and just watch those movie trailers. I hate to say it, but that's almost what they expect. And, so when you really talk about technology, they want to be wowed. Don't just slap those notes up on PowerPoint. And as an example, on the CD, what I did provide you is I provide you a Pirates of the Presentation. It's really late at night. Pirates of the Caribbean. It's a presentation I did using Macromedia Flash to teach. It was about a 45 to an hour lesson on, the real Pirates of the Caribbean. And so take a look at that, and it's very interactive. It has an interactive map that you move into and move out of. Just some really cool stuff. Just some really neat things. And so take a look at that, and hopefully it'll help inspire your creative team on campus. Maybe they can help you. If you've got digital media students who do multimedia, talk to them, give them a chance to take your lectures and come up with a really creative way to do it. The other thing that they like to is to use technology is for communication. Keep in mind that they chat back and forth. I think this is where WebCT and Blackboard has really come in handy for keeping up with my students. They can have instant messaging in that particular classroom, class setting. They can also do email back and forth, discussion pages. If you've got a really good question and everything else, it works really good, especially for as a teacher with them. You can use it as lesson reinforcements. Whether it's not just video, showing a video, but like I said, make them do the video, make them use technology. They've got it already. They've got cell phones. They've got all this other stuff. A teacher we just interviewed was talking about how he has students buy a camera to start, and every week they got to turn in 20 pictures as it relates to that particular subject. And instead of buying the camera, keep in mind they've already got cell phones. Use it, and don't be afraid to learn from them. They probably know more than you and I do, so let them teach. And in fact, let them teach a class on how to do something. Like I said, they'll retain about 90% of what they teach. One more thing before I jump off the technology page. I think it's in my notes that I got right here. Yeah. A product that I want to put out, and I'll put the link to this on the. You'll see an extra index. You'll see an HTML thing that says web pages and everything else. But there's a great program. If you can get your school to get this, it's good, or find something very similar to it. It's called Illuminate. And what it does, I love it. It's a really neat feature, and I wish our school had it. But what it does is that you can have all your, especially if you teach online classes, you can have them all meet you at a certain time online. And what it does is whenever you begin, it actually takes whatever you have on your screen is what that student sees. So you can, if you're showing them how to use a particular software, you can do it on your screen, similar to what I'm doing right now on mine, and basically they get to see that. All of them experience it. And what's great about it is that if at any point they have a question about something, they can hit a button on their keyboard, and you get this little hand that says, hey, like a raised hand, on your side, letting you know that so-and-so has a particular question. They can also link up a USB mic and talk at the same time, so you can talk about concepts and show them stuff. And if you have a student that didn't get there for class on time, Illuminate actually archives the entire presentation, so they can go to it and download it and watch it whenever they need to. Which also brings up another point, podcasting. But here's my thing on podcasting. A lot of people think, well, I'll just, talk into the mic as I do my class, and that will be technology. Well, here's all I can tell you. If the lecture is going to be boring, in general, putting it on a microphone or in a digital format isn't going to make it any more exciting. Unless, of course, you're going to go through and add sound effects. Maybe you're going to go through and add video to have a video podcast, and that would be something. Make it, I hate to say entertaining, but make it something that would draw them into it. Keep in mind, this generation has a lot of high expectations. So it kind of brings it to this point, entertainment and excitement, make it an experience. Again, take a look at the pirate presentation I did, the immersive media where they want to be drawn into it. Think about why we even go to the movies. We go to the movies because we're for the next 2 hours we're drawn into this different world. We get to experience something, here right there in front of us that we normally can't experience anywhere else. It's kind of an experience for us. And so that, if you can think about it, this is what this generation is looking for. And if you can approach this even with math, especially with history, oh my God, the ideas for history that you could do, just to sort of grab them and draw them right into it would be exciting. And which brings up to the point on video games. I am definitely providing you some links to some websites that do educational video games. But the idea of using video games for educational purposes is profound. I can't tell you some of the ideas. Again, go pick up Mark Prinsky's book, and I've got a link on there in the reference page on the instructions PDF. Don't Bother Me, Mom, I'm Learning, but just some really good information on the positive effects of video games. In fact, a lot of the stuff I'm reading about how surgeons will warm up before surgery, playing 30 minutes of video game to help get their hand-eye coordination going. In fact, they've been shown, I can't tell you how their proficiency was increased by 30 to, I think it was like 30 or 40%. Trust me, if I'm underneath that knife, I'm more than happy to go tell the doc, hey, put on a game or two before you come, work on me. But video games have a lot of potential for reaching this generation, and keeping in mind that this generation, I think it's like 80% of them play video games. They're immersed into them. They like them. Video games already offer a lot of learning aspects. One student was telling me that he learned more in, what was it? He played, I think it was a game called Civilization. I think it's called Civilization. And he's telling me, you have to pick your leaders and everything else like that. If it's for the Roman Empire, if you're building that civilization, you got to choose. And the characters, the leaders, are historical figures. And if you don't know anything about that particular historical figure, you could do a lot of damage to your civilization. So you really got to research it out. And so the amount of talent that goes into the amount of problem solving in video games can be used. One teacher at the conference I didn't see, but someone was kind enough to tell me about it. He I think he has his students log into World of Warcraft, and he conducts his lesson on the inside of a game. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. I told my students about it. They're like, but what happens if they kill him? I was like, I don't know. Good point. So, but anyway, but there's a lot of potential there for video games in education. MIT has done some really good stuff. They came up with an idea for a game called Revolution, which basically helps teach the American Revolution in history, but a really cool class that I came across, and I provided the link just because I can't jump to it out of the presentation, but is the University of North Carolina in Greensboro has an economics, Econ 201 is what it's called, and again, I'll provide the link. And what it is you play the game, you pass the game, you pass the class. And it's a 3D environment, I think similar to kind of like what Myst was. And your alien civilization, you have to rebuild the Earth. I made the mistake of saying repopulate at presentation. I got a lot of snickers about that. So anyway, but they rebuild the civilization using economic principles from the class, and they're taught that inside the game. And so it's got a really cool. It's going to be really interesting to see how that takes place. And so I've also provided several links, to different things. There's an organization called SeriousGames.org, dealing with educational games. There's the EducationArcade.org, which does the exact same thing. A lot of the colleges are really looking into having some type of digital media lab to help provide these type of services to teachers to help them come up with these great ideas for that. And so anyway, I'll provide you some of those links that you can take a look at. So anyway, don't discard video games. Really think about how inclusive they can be. So, but anyway, and that's pretty much it for the presentation. And so, sorry, very long-winded and everything else. If you like the audio, fantastic. It's just something I wanted to do for those of you that missed, because, again, my presentations have a lot of hidden navigation and everything else like that, and so I didn't want you struggling to figure out what did he talk about here. So there you have it. But I just really want to encourage you that when you really think about engaging these particular students, think about your audience. Don't look for technology that necessarily aids you as an instructor. Look for the technology that's going to aid the learning of your student. Understand your audience, because if you can't speak their language, you're not going to reach them. And I can't. If you ever want me to send you information on, if you ever say, well, I'm using this particular font, or I'm using this particular color, what do you think about this? And so let me know. I will provide you links to some of that stuff if you ask for it. But think about your audience. Think about what's the best way to reach them, because in advertising, that's what made the sales. Once you can make that connection. In education, it's the exact same thing. So anyway, good luck to you, and thank you so much.